continue to give an overview to know that to give an outline about what is the main topics that is discussed in the pre-recorded lectures, and I will of course gradually go to. I'll start with the finite dimensional vector space and the concept of finite dimensional Hilbert space, or in more common language, if a measurement is such that it can only produce a finite number of outcomes, then you need a representation in terms of a finite dimensional vector. I'll first talk about that because it's easy and it's very familiar to you. Then I'll talk in terms of the infinite dimensional, which is also familiar to you, but as a language of function, because that is what probably you had done in the previous semester. You solve particle in a box, harmonic oscillator, all those problems. They are actually, you did all those problems using functions and all, but they are also a vector space. That is what I discussed previous day, and I will also connect it naturally between these two things. Okay. So now yesterday we understood that we need the concept of a dual vector, so a dual state. So dual vector means if I have a phi like that, I need to have a concept of a psi which is like this. So if phi and psi, these two are different, such that I can define this inner product, which is nothing but equivalent to this, a row vector and a column vector. That is why I need this concept of this. For every vector, I need a concept of its dual vector to define properly define this thing, a scalar product. Okay? So this is one thing we understood, and we called this one of them as Kate, another of them as Bra, according to Dirac. And then I will talk about an identity which is not very unusual. You know already this identity for regular vector, but I will now tell you in terms of this abstract vector, and I will ask you to try to prove it. Okay. So the identity is following. So if I have a vector A and a vector B, so if I want to produce a scalar product from A and B vector, I need to write the A in terms of a row vector and B in terms of a column vector. It's in this same sense. Okay. So the object, so let's think of A and B as a regular vector, as you have learned. It has a direction, it has a magnitude. So it has also component ax, ay, az, bx, by, bz. So in order to define a column, a object like this, you need to write the ax, ay, az like this, and bx, by, bz like this, right? So that is in the same sense as like analogous to the Bra and Kate. Okay. So now the identity is very simple. The identity is given by A dot A. Okay. We write it in this way to tell you this is the amplitude times B dot B, both are scalars, is greater than or equal to A dot B square. Are you familiar with this identity? Have you seen it anywhere in any form? Or can you, even if you have not seen it, can you tell me obviously why it is true? You don't need anything to prove it. It's a one-liner. Any comments?
Like dot product represents the projection of vector on another vector, right? So A dot A will give maximum projection of A on A. B dot B will give maximum projection of B on B. But A dot B cannot give the maximum projection on B until and unless both are same.
Correct. That is very nice. That is a very physical way of saying it. And there is a comment that is the cos. That's the mathematical way of saying it is cos theta. But the physical way of saying is what Advait said. Okay, because this guy has a cos theta, and cos theta must be less equal to 1. That's the mathematical way. And the physical way is to think in terms of the projection, a visual way. So this is obviously true for A and B vector. But this vectors has this structure that ax, ay, az, and then there is this angle which you can define. But for this abstract vector, can you define that? Of course you cannot, because you don't know what is the structure. Or if it is an n-dimensional vector, then how will you define even an angle in that space? So now you have to prove it slightly differently. and the proof is discussed in various textbooks. I think Griffiths and everything, all these textbook has. But I want you to try. It's using a very similar idea, a very simple idea of positivity of certain of a vector construction. So the proof, the statement is following equivalent statement, because A dot A is basically phi dot phi, psi, B dot B is like psi dot psi, must be equal to phi dot psi mod square. So this thing is called Cauchy towards inequality. So try to prove it. Very simple proof, 2-line proof. And this is an important object in which will help you towards constructing the idea of uncertainty from here. Okay? Uncertainty principle. Okay, so this is one thing. Now I will talk about the other thing which I discussed last time, that we know that if I have a n-dimensional complex vector space, so we argued already that why we need a complex vector space. We also argued that the dimension of the vector space can be anything between 1 to infinity. So depending on what are you measuring. So let's assume I have a n-dimensional complex Hilbert space. So complex, right now let me talk about complex vector space, because I have not yet discussed about the notion of projective vectors, which is the Hilbert space. So we know that a n-dimensional, for a n-dimensional complete vector space, let's say we have n, so a complete, say the statement is a complete set of n orthonormal vectors. Yeah. Let's say I have that, and I call them some n, where n is 1, 2 to n. So it's orthonormal, which means any two pair of them must satisfy this. Which means if they are same, its identity, it is normal. That means the magnitude is normal. If it is not same, then it is 0, which means they are orthogonal to each other. Which means, so you must find n vectors which satisfy this. That is the meaning of a complete, having a complete set of n orthonormal vectors. Now we know that this kind of set, this set will form a, so this set will form a basis set when that happens. Which means any vector in this space can be expressed in terms of those vectors. And these examples, you know already, these are all familiar examples. So are you comfortable if I use this kind of language? Complete set of vectors, basis vectors and all that. You know this from some mathematical methods or a math course, right? Okay, very good. I'm just going to speaking to in a childish manner, I think, because you know all this, so I can go a little advanced. Okay, so this implies that this psi, any arbitrary vector in this space, can be expressed in terms of this complete set of vectors. And express means that a linear combination of them will give me that Cn. Now, how do I compute this coefficient Cn? I can compute it as some arbitrary Cm is nothing but m psi, which means, and why it is true? Because this is n, Cn is some m psi n, and this guy is delta nm. That's why this is nothing but this. So this is how you can compute that what is the coefficient of this expansion, and this coefficient is nothing but the inner product between the state which you are, the arbitrary state, and these orthonormal states. And this is also, you can check this example with this regular vector 0, 1 wala vector 0, 1, 0, 3. So now I can rewrite this thing as some n psi n, because we established that this is my Cn. Okay, so this can be rewritten as n psi. The purpose of rewriting it that, because I such that I can write this is nothing but identity psi. So this, what is this identity? This identity is n sum over n. Because psi goes to psi, which means you must have multiplied it by it with an identity. That is why psi is going to psi. Okay, everything is clear in this statement. So this thing is called a resolution of identity, this statement, and it is one of the most valuable thing. You will learn a lot of math and a lot of algebra, a lot of calculation will be dependent on this resolution of identity. Resolution of identity. So what you are doing basically, why you are calling it resolution identity? Because you are breaking down the identity into these n parts of these eigenvectors, or not eigenvector, this orthonormal complete set of vectors. And this object inside, this is actually, you will see this is actually a projection operator. So I will explain you in a moment what is a projection operator. So just let me just open my notes. I need to see something. Wait, it is here in Piazza.
Sir, in
For
the
some reason it's not loading. Yeah, tell me.
in the inequality, won't the left hand side just be 1?
What is the left hand side?
Like,
What do you mean by that?
can you scroll up?
This side?
No, like up the Cauchy-Schwarz inequality I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
Wouldn't the left hand side just be 1?
Yeah, if you define them to be predefine them to be normal. But
They're
I'm
always
not
normalized, right? Or like,
not necessarily. I'm just saying some two arbitrary ket.
okay.
I'm talking about two arbitrary ket. A dot A or some psi dot psi. Okay. Okay. So
Sir,
yes.
can you go just a bit up?
Yeah, say that again.
I want you to scroll a bit up. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Here?
from that CN,
Okay.
from how you wrote that CN thing, can you explain it again?
Yeah, what are you saying? I can't hear properly.
The line. So
Yes.
the line with the tick mark. Can you explain
Yes.
from that line again?
Okay. So we just argued that this CM must be M psi. Did you understand this line? Let me change the color. Did you understand this line?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm doing, so see, if Cm is M psi, then I can replace this Cn here by N psi, right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So then I'm just rewriting this because this is a scalar, so I can just move it there. So I'm just moving it because it's just a number. So I'm moving it there, right? So then I'm saying since this is psi and this is psi, so then this object must be identity. So that is this statement. Make sense?
Yes, sir. Can you explain that? What were you trying to say regarding that number or something like that scalar?
Yeah, so why I can move this object here? Because this is just a number. Whether I write it in the front or back, it doesn't matter. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's a scalar. It's a coefficient. Okay?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Any more comment? Okay. So up to this is super clear. So now I will come to the point of the projection operator and this. So this guy is a projection operator. Why is that? What is the job of this guy? So the job of this guy, so if it acts, so Pn, let me switch the color again. So Pn is nothing but N for a particular state. Okay. So now if my Pn acts on psi, then what will happen? It will do the following. Okay. So what is this object? So this is again a scalar. So this object is nothing but some scalar. So let me call it some Cn and N. So you start with a vector psi and you land on one of the complete set of vector. So it's like equivalent to projecting that psi on that N. Okay, is that clear? This statement. That's why I'm calling it a projection vector. Can you can you think of a similar way to do a projection vector for a 3D vector, as you know, constructing a projection vector? Is it clear? Okay, let's assume it's clear. You can understand that how weird it is for me, because it's of absolute silence, a blank screen. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Okay. So now let's prove some property, try to see some property. So I assume it is super clear. So I will not go for an example.
So there's a question in the chat box.
Yeah. What question?
How is it a projection? How is it projection?
How is it projection? Yeah. So see, what is it doing? It is acting on psi, on some psi, some general abstract psi, which I don't know. It can be anything. Now I argued that psi can be written as a linear combination of all the basis vectors, right? That part it's super clear to you. Now what is the projection operator is doing, or whatever operator, let me not call it projection, some operator Pn, if it is given by this, it is taking only the component which is along n, one of these vectors, and its coefficient. So if I add this operator on this, I get a vector at the end which is only along, it's a vector which is along that line, along that n component, if you want to think pictorially. Because there is a coefficient, I won't say it is exactly that vector, but it is aligned along that vector. So you are projecting the state psi. It is equivalent to saying you are projecting that state psi on that n. Okay, this is equivalent to saying, let's say I have some vector, arbitrary vector. So what I'm doing, I'm projecting that vector on a particular axis, x-axis, y-axis, or z-axis. Okay, this Pn operator is doing that job. Is that clear? That why it is projection?
So sir, mainly we are saying that because we are applying something to the vector and we are getting a scalar, and we know that the vector operators are like mainly to
No, we are not getting a scalar. We are still getting another vector. We are starting with a vector and getting another vector, but this vector is one of the component vectors, one of the basis vectors. Okay.
Okay, so
With
there
a
is nothing
coefficient.
like,
We are getting it with
there
a
is nothing
coefficient.
like dot or like some kind of product.
No, you understand this operation, right? This particular full operation. That Pn is this. If I apply this n and psi is basically my Cn, and this n is just a vector. So I am ending up with a vector which is not the original vector, but along the one of the basis vectors of the original vector because of acting this Pn. So this is equivalent to saying I am finding the projection of this vector along this one of these axes. Because any vector, any arbitrary vector in this space, so let's say any arbitrary vector can be written as a linear combination of this 1 0 0 0 1 0 plus 3 3 0 0 1, right? So now what is the, so I will come in a moment how to construct this projection vector, but let's say there is some projection vector. So the projection vector construct can be constructed by using something called the outer product or Kronecker product. Are you familiar with the idea of Kronecker product or tensor
No.
product?
No.
Okay, so I will come to that. So the fact that you are acting this Pn on this A will give you, let's say this Pn is P3, which means the n and n, which is 3 and 3. So 3 is basically 0 0 1 and 0 0 1. So notice this is slightly different from this dot product, because dot product is one row another column. Here it is both row or both column. Okay, or the other way. Sorry, it's not both row and both column. So let me say it the other way. So a dot product does the following. So if I say A dot B, it is basically this and this. Okay. Now here I am flipping the order. So A dot B is similar to phi dot psi. Okay. But here what I am doing, I am asking what is this object. Okay. So this must be something opposite. So it must be these then 0 0 1 and 0 0 1. So this thing there is a thing called, this thing is called Kronecker product or outer product. You can Google it. I'll explain it to later that how does it exactly look like. But a inner product or this product, a dot product, reduces the dimension, which means you start with a 3D object and you end up with a 1D object, which means a single number, a scalar. But here you end up with a matrix, which it increases the dimension. This is called tensor product. So you start with two 3D objects and you end up with a 3x3 matrix. I will describe the operation, but for now just think of the pictorial and abstract description. So if I apply P3, what I'll get according to this definition? Shivam, what should I get?
Yeah, so like Cn and like this 3.
Yeah, Cn means C3.
Yeah, sorry, C3 and
I should
3.
get C31001. Okay. So I started with an arbitrary vector and ended up with a vector which is along the z direction. Right? So that is why this projection.
Sir, that Pn is a matrix, right?
Pn is a matrix. Yes.
And then you added some psi there, and then that just became the dot product. Like,
no, Pn is a matrix. So I am when I multiply a matrix with a vector, what do I get? A vector, right?
yeah, you get a vector, but you just like that, like ket n bra n is a notation for a matrix, right? For the entire matrix.
Ket in bra. Yeah, this object is a notation of a matrix. That's right.
Yes, and then how have you just separated the bra n and then used it as for the dot product for the psi?
Yeah, because this object, if I think of each term of this matrix, each term is basically this n and psi. Okay. So I visualize this as, okay, so if you want a more clear visual, so let me say it like that. So P3, let's say P3 acting on A. Okay. Now P3 is 0, 0, 1. Okay. This is a 0, 0, 1. This is a X, A, Y, A, Z. So now I can do this, right? A dot product. Is it clear?
Yes, yeah.
So I get a AZ 001, right? It's just that, just an abstract notation, but the idea is same. Is it super clear?
Yes.
Okay, everyone else super clear that
Yes.
why this projection? Okay, now projection has the following property, which means if I do two projections, one after the another, it is equivalent to doing nothing. Okay. So Pn, sorry, I wrote it wrong. Because it is equivalent to doing one projection. Why? Because once I projected, what is the point of projecting it again? I'll get that same thing again. Right? Similarly, if I do a Pn, Pm, I get 0. Which means once I projected it along the basis vector, because the orthogonal, if I project again, I'll get a 0. Or that means I cannot project. Is these two statements clear? Can you visualize it using this 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0? So if my A is one of these basis vectors 0, 0, 1, then I get the same thing, and if I act it again and again, nothing changes, right? Not only square, any power is the same. Make sense? And if I do it once in one direction, x direction, then I try to do it y direction, because these two are orthogonal, so I must get a 0. So I am arguing it physically, and I am urging you to do it mathematically at least once. Do you understand this statement? Okay, let me assume it is super clear. So whenever you don't say anything, I will assume what is convenient for me. Okay, that's the rule. Okay, now I want to continue this for these vectors towards the state vectors or state kits. Okay, so now remember there are two identities we learned. One is resolution of identity. I mean, one identity we learned. It is the resolution of identity. And we learned there is a projection operator, some P, A, and P, let me call it PM, not to repeat the. So PM projects, the job of this is project onto state M. And then we learned that there are two more properties. One is, it's just written above, but I'm writing it again. Now let's see what is the equivalent of that in the context of Stern-Gerlach experiment. Okay. So what is this guy in the context of Stern-Gerlach experiment? What it should be? If I take the n to be, let's say z direction, can somebody tell me what should be the case?
So can you
So
repeat?
yeah, so what should I write if I have to write it in the context of, let's say, Stern-Gerlach experiment? So remember what is Stern-Gerlach. Let's consider the Z for now. There are only two possibilities. Yeah? If I send some arbitrary beam. So what does it mean for this? There are only two possible states. Okay, the dimension of the Hilbert space is 2. The total dimension, capital N, is 2. And these two are referred as plus Z and minus Z.
So will it be like P1 into phi is equal to C1
Correct.
into Z plus?
So there are two P's. Let me call them P plus and P minus. Okay. Now we know this sum is basically sum of all the Pn's. So this n is basically P plus P minus is 1. So this resolution of identity is basically plus Z plus minus Z equal to 1. Clear? And this is basically the total projection because it's P plus P minus. Okay. Now let's try to prove these arguments pictorially without algebra and then with algebra. So what does it mean to say Pn square equal to Pn? So let me first argue that what does it mean to say do nothing? So do nothing is this modified Stern-Gerlach, right? Where you are splitting it and joining it. So this is your identity because what you are doing is basically you are separating them into plus Z and recombining them. Now let's say you block one of the two. What is this? So the plus Z is only allowed. So this is the P plus. Similarly, if you block the other, it is the P minus. So what is P plus P plus? A P plus P plus is this, basically this. So if you have a plus Z, you do a P plus and P plus, you get a plus Z. So that is basically saying P plus square is P plus, because here also you get a plus Z. Okay. Now similarly, you can continue to this argument because P plus means this and P minus is basically blocking the second one. So this is equal to, so this statement is equal to saying basically this is equivalent to doing this. So this is basically saying P plus is equal to P plus, right? Now similarly you can do a P plus and P minus. So that is basically because if you now try to see what is the minus Z component of this, there is nothing. So that's why you get nothing. So if you have a plus Z and try to do a minus Z measurement, you get nothing. So that's why P plus P minus is 0. Okay. Now let's try to prove it mathematically. Okay. p plus square. What is p plus square? So p plus is basically plus z plus z. So p plus is okay. Now we know these things. So this thing, when you combine them, is 1, and then you land with plus z plus z. So this is p plus. I proved it mathematically. Okay. Similarly, I try to do p plus p minus. So this is plus z plus z, and this is minus z minus z. Now we know this identity. So this gives me 0, and that's it, 0. Right? Is everything clear so far?
Yes.
So now what did we do? We did everything using in 3 different ways. One, using classical vector. So remind yourself all these things using classical vector. Because what is this equivalent of P? So A is A x I cap, A y j cap, A z k cap. So I want to project along A. So what is my P? Let's say Z. So what is my P3 in this language? The P3 must be projecting it along this. So let me call this operator as some I dot I. Okay, I. This is equivalent to doing this job. So I along A. So that will give me not I want K. So that will give me AZ K cap. Now you try to prove this same identity, I dot K, K dot K, all these things using these vectors. Then you prove it in this way, and then you do it pictorially. So it's the same thing, just done again and again in different ways, and make it consistent with the quantum mechanical observation. So notice what are we trying to do? We are using our pre-existing knowledge of vectors and transporting that here in the context of these experiments. Okay, that is how we are developing the formalism. That is how generally any formalism is developed, and in quantum mechanics, that is how it was done. That was basically the work of Dirac, and it was not so easy to do because this kind of linear algebra was not like something were taught in school and college and all that. Now it is done now like that. That was a recent development at that point of time. That's why Dirac is a non-trivial person who did that. Okay. So now let's understand the job of an operator. First understand it mathematically, then understand it physically, and then bring it in the context. Okay. So what is an operator? So a operator acts on any vector and give another vector. That is what you learned. Earlier we gave this example. R acting on V will give me some V prime. So let's formalize it. So let's say an arbitrary state, which is like some superposition state or something. So let's think in terms of shall we talk about, no, let's not talk about plus z and minus z. So let's talk about some arbitrary vector phi and chi. So let's say I have some arbitrary linear combination of phi, of some chi and some chi, some psi and some chi. It's like too many Greek letters. I'm just mixing everything. Some psi and some phi. Okay, because these are the two notations we are using. So I want to see, so this alpha is an object which starts from here, and I want to know what it does to this guy, this whole thing. So how will I do it? So to know that, all I have to know how the alpha acts on these component vectors, which means psi and phi, because C1 is a scalar. So we have to know this. Okay, is it clear so far? this relation you agree with, right? Even if I don't know what is the alpha n. So you anytime you have difficulty, you go back to this notion of vectors. It is all borrowed from there. The machinery is borrowed from there and applied in this peculiar context. Okay, because to begin with, we agreed the state of a particle can be superposition of other states. So that's where you always remember that why did we agree to do this? Once you get that, the rest is very easy because you are familiar with vectors. Okay. So that means if I want to, so if I know, if you agree to that, and this is actually a property of linear operator. And this is actually another reason why quantum mechanics is technically easy, because it's all linear operator. It's all linear. In classical mechanics, actually, you have much more complexity. So you have non-linearity. But that complexity reappears in quantum mechanics. The complexity reappears in a much bigger form when you have many particles. Then the problem of a different kind of problem appears. But single particle quantum mechanics is super easy. Okay? Technically super easy. Conceptually, there are issues. Okay, so now that we agreed to this property of linear, so I am stating this in a way that I'm connecting it with your knowledge of vector. But when you learn more mathematical physics, you will see this is just a property of any linear operator. There are differential forms also which follows this rule. So now that means if I want to know how this guy act on any arbitrary psi, all I have to know how it acts on the basis vector. So this psi is basically some Cn n. So therefore, all I have to know how alpha acts on n. Okay. That should be my goal. And then I know the matrix form of this, because now from there I can work out this. So once I know these coefficients, that how these coefficients act on them, so then I know anything that is there to know about it. Okay. So did I write it correct? If alpha is acting on m. No, I didn't write it correctly. So let me fix this. But the statement is correct that if I know a psi, which is basically a Cn, so in order to know that how the alpha act on this psi, I have to know how the alpha acts on this n. That information is everything. So let me try to find out how to work out that information. Alpha is some n acting on some n. Okay. So now in order to do that, so I have to, so let's try to construct this information. So this vector, I'm confused about something. Can someone help me there? That how should I work out this equation correctly? How should I know that how the alpha is acting on an arbitrary vector psi? Any comment on that?
You'll have to work out how it acts on each one of the bases.
Yes. Yeah, so how should I write down this the matrix form of the alpha? That is what I'm trying to say. So I'm trying to show that this alpha is like a matrix and the elements can be worked out from this basis vector. That is what I'm trying to show. Can someone help me with that? And I think I made a mistake. I think I can also see where I made the mistake, but I want you to point me out. Any comments?
So since n is a column matrix.
No, forget quantum. This right now it is all linear algebra.
No, I said column matrix.
Sorry, what matrix?
It's a column vector. Sorry, column vector, right?
Column vector. Correct.
And such that only like every element of it is 0 except like 1.
No, not necessarily.
But it's a basis.
If it is a basis vector, yes. Yeah. So it is delta nm, some delta. It is 1 at only one place, elsewhere it is 0. And
yeah, so like let's say the third entry in n is 1, others are 0, then the third entry in every row, like so third column of alpha can be written based on how it acts on n.
Right. So you are in the right direction. So the best way to represent it is following. So I am using a little bad notation. That's why it got weird. So I want to know how alpha acts on any vector in this vector space. And this is given by some linear combination alpha nm m. Okay. Now this linear combination, this alpha nm, this coefficient, that is everything that you need to know about the action of the alpha on this vector n. Okay, this n is the basis vector of this space. Okay, so now how will I know that? So to know that, I multiply in both direction. Okay, and that is nothing but, so you are in the right direction, because now I have multiplied this by m. So let me again, I'm using some bad notation, but you know, by using this identity, this is my alpha mn, because I use this property. Mn is delta mn. So once you know the delta mn, you know everything that is there. You need to know how the alpha acts on any of the basis vector. Okay. So this is a matrix. This form is a matrix. That is why the action of alpha on any vector in this vector space is a matrix, is like multiplying that by a matrix. And once you know that, you know the action of alpha on any n in that basis, in that vector space. And once you know that, you know the action of alpha of any random vector, because any random vector is a linear combination of that n. Right? Is this thing make sense? Is this picture clear? Okay. So basically now the task boils down to finding this matrix, which is alpha 1 1, alpha 1 2, alpha 1 3, like that, alpha 1 n, alpha 2 1, dot 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 dot, like alpha n. But each entry is basically how this operator, if you act this operator on this matrix and then you multiply by the corresponding column and row vector, then what scalar you get. So that is where the task boils down. So this is the action of an operator on a vector, on any random vector, and the action of an operator on the basis vector. Okay. Now there is a special kind of vector, a special set of vector in this vector space, which has the following property. Okay, which means so here what I have seen, if n is some vector, some basis vector, if I act alpha on it, I get some linear combination of other basis vector, because the job of alpha or the operator is to take that vector to another vector, and any vector is a linear combination of other vector. So physically we know this, and mathematically also we have shown that. But there is some special vector in this vector space where if you act the alpha, you get the same vector with some coefficient. Okay, so those special vectors are called eigenvectors. Eigenvectors of this operator alpha, and this value, this number you get, are called eigenvalues.
Sir, I didn't understand how m alpha n gives us the matrix, like it will give us all the information for the transfer.
Yeah, correct. So you want to know what is your agenda? You want to know, if I act the operator on a basis vector n, where does it go? Where does it take us? Which vector? And that vector is nothing but a linear combination of all the basis vectors in that space. So if you know this linear combination, this alpha, then you know this information, that what is the consequence or what is the result of acting an operator in a basis vector in this vector space.
So you are writing the resultant vector as a superposition of, like, as a linear
Yes.
combination of all the bases.
Yes, because think physically what is happening.
Right.
When you act a operator, you are taking this vector to another arbitrary vector. Let me call it some p. Right? Now P is a linear combination of all the vectors, all the basis vectors in that vector space, right? Now what is that linear combination? That is what I argued. That linear combination is nothing but these matrix elements.
Yes, yeah, got it. And that M alpha n will give the coefficient for every.
Yeah, the coefficients. So you want you to know this matrix form. If you know that, you know everything. There is nothing left to be known. Now then I argued that this is, see, all these things you know. I am just repackaging this old info. It's old wine in new bottle. So this is just another way of saying what you already know. Now there are some special vector in this vector space which are called zeta or xi. I don't know what it is. Anyways, so these vectors are special because if you add that operator, you get back that vector again, not a different. So this vector doesn't take n to p, it takes n to n with a coefficient, with some number in front. Now when that happens, these vectors are called eigenvectors and these numbers are called eigenvalues. Okay, so this is basically, so now you can write, you can say this is some alpha 1 1 alpha 1 2 in the language of this way, which when acts on this this vector zeta 1 zeta 2 zeta n, it gives you some a zeta, some number zeta 1 zeta 2 zeta n. This is equivalent to saying for this, the consequence of this action is just multiplying by a scalar times the identity matrix times this, because the identity matrix does nothing except returns that vector. That's why I'm not writing that identity matrix. And then you know the prescription, how to calculate these eigenvalues. You know that, right? Writing down the, like calculating this date alpha minus a identity equal to 0 and how you calculate the a's. You know the routine, right? How, if I give you a matrix, how to calculate the eigenvalues or eigenvectors. You know that? Okay, good. So this is basically the whole process. Now there are two more things I will mention, then I will close the class and open it for questions or random questions, whatever. So now we want to define a class of vectors which are Hermitian vector. I argued earlier why we need that, and I will argue again tomorrow that why we need that. So they have the following property, that if I sandwich it between any two states, not just n or m, the basis states. If I sandwich this guy between any two states, so it has the following property. So this is the condition we need because we want these objects to be real. And when it will happen, when alpha dagger is basically alpha. This matrix element will be this. And then, so this is the condition, and this will happen when actually this alpha dagger is equal to alpha. So try to think about this. I will go in the details about it later. So when this happens, they are called Hermitian. Now these Hermitian operators, so I will, before I come to the point that what are the properties of these Hermitian operators, I'll tell you why do we need this Hermitian operator. Because first of all, we will also go back to the, so everything we do, we always go back to the context of Stern-Gerlach, okay? So Stern-Gerlach or double slit. So now that we are, so earlier all the projection business we understood, now we understood the properties of an operator. So now I will go back to the, and you also try to think about it yourself and say, why do we need an operator? What is the job of the operator? Then we will argue that to satisfy that job in the context of the experiment, we only care about those operators which satisfy these properties, the hermiticity. And then the consequence of that will be another set of desirable properties which we want for to match with the physical context. Then we'll formulate the theory of operators and Hamiltonian everything in terms of this Hermitian operator. So that is the agenda. Next. Now notice that all these things is also exactly how we do it in the pre-recorded. It's just I'm just repeating the same thing in a slightly different language. Okay. And once we are clear about this point, Then we will go on to discuss this in the context of, we'll just extend the same statements in the context of n equal to infinity, which is the continuous operators. And we'll see there the Fourier basis and all those things. Now again, those who are having trouble with the Fourier basis to begin with, I suggest you to go to these 2 supplementary lecture I have posted. You have seen that, right? So those 2 supplementary lecture are not a part of the, I will not discuss it in detail in class because they are not a part of the regular course. It is just to help you to deal with the Fourier transformation and all the prerequisite, which I thought, which generally my thought was that it will be taught in the math methods and we'll use it here. But then I learned that it is taught in the math method course a little later. That is why you might feel that you need something here which you are learning later. So that is why I created those 2 supplementary supplementary lectures. So just go through that and then you will understand the context of Fourier transformation or the Fourier basis, the e to the power ik explain wave basis. So everything is clear so far, what all we discussed today?
Sir,
Yes.
in the pre-recorded lecture, in the lecture number 4,
Hmm.
you were talking about stuff like linear transformations and transformation of basis, and then it directly skipped to commutative.
Okay, so lecture number 4.
Yes, and then I think part 1 of lecture 5 is only like 10 minutes.
Yes.
And I don't know if something is missing but that
No,
seemed,
nothing is missing. It is intentional like that.
because like Hermitian and all this weren't discussed in any of the pre-recorded lectures, I think.
Really?
Yes, because in lecture 4 you talked about transformation of basis and linear transformation and stuff, and then it directly goes to commutation, like commutative operators and stuff, simultaneous eigenstates and stuff like that.
Yeah, so simultaneous eigenstate, I have discussed it across 4 and 5, both lectures. So let me see, where did I discuss the hermiticity? Because hermiticity is important, or at least I have mentioned hermiticity.
It's there in the notes, but it's not there in the pre-recorded lecture.
In lecture, which note it is there in lecture 4?
Yeah, the note titled lecture 3 math.
Yeah, I know. So there is a little bit of off sync. So where do I mention the hermiticity? I mentioned components, I mentioned blanket.
Like in that one, the page number 7.
Yeah. So yeah, so didn't I talk at all about the page, what is there in page 8?
No. At page 7, the video ends.
Okay, then I'll supplement that. Because the hermiticity is important. So next talk, next lecture, in the real live lecture, I'll go over the this missing part.
Okay.
So the reason I don't go over the commuting vector part is that the commuting vector I will not discuss in the lecture 4 at all, because I repeat them in lecture 5 again.
Yes.
Okay. So that is not a missing part really. This part is just as a note, you can take it. But the point hermiticity is somehow missing, and I think
all of
I
that
don't know why. Yeah, so I will discuss that in the next live lecture.
Sir, I have a question regarding the transformation from. Can you go a little up?
Yes.
I think this matrix, so we are operating alpha on some basis vector n, and we are not here. I think a little up. This is the eigen. Yeah, this one, this alpha 1 1. Now, when we are expressing alpha operating on n as a linear combination of alpha m and ket m, this set of ket m's is another basis, right? But it's not the same as it should not be the same as the set of ket n basis, right? Otherwise, alpha mn is 0 for all m not equal to n.
That is exactly what happens in the eigenbasis, right? So in the eigenbasis is a special set of vector for which this alpha nm is 0 if m is not equal to n, right?
Yeah,
but it is not generally true. It is not generally true, because the job of alpha is to take a vector to another vector. So now if n is a vector, any vector, not necessarily a special kind of vector, any arbitrary vector. So we know if it is eigenvector, then it is the reason we are discussing about eigenvectors, because we argued that any vector is a linear combination of eigenvector. Therefore, if we understand the operation of alpha on eigenvector, not eigenvector, sorry, let me write it down instead of mixing.
On the basis vectors.
Basis vector. So any linear combination of any vector is a linear combination of basis vector.
I think I'm getting a little confused with, like, I don't remember the linear algebra part properly, but like, does one linear transformation kind of take one basis set to another basis set? Is that true in general?
Not necessarily, no.
It should
Because
take it to a linearly independent set, right? I think.
Okay, good question. So okay, so your question is following. So if I think in terms of a simple example. So if I take these three vectors, they are basis vectors, right? The three
Yeah.
axes. Now, if I do an operation which takes these vectors to some other vector, okay? So is it essentially a? So if I do that operation on a single vector, yeah. So the question is following. So maybe the question can be answered very simply. So if I do apply a matrix on one of these, so let me call it I, J, and K. So can we pose the question in terms of this? If I apply a matrix A, so let me call it A, because such that I am not biased. It need not be rotation. It can be some arbitrary operation. If I act it on I get some random vector, let's say A, some random vector A, right? Now you are saying that if I do the same operation on J and K, right? So A on J and A on K. So let me, I get B and I get C. So now your question is the ABC is necessarily also a basis, right? Is that what you are asking?
Yes, if that happens, then this alpha mn kind of that notation is a little weird, right?
Why?
Like if we
So
yeah,
I
like,
don't care about if this happens or not. So for example, I have to think a little more to understand, to be sure about what is the criteria for this to happen. ABC is also a basis. I cannot answer it right now on the fly, but what I can answer that this is equivalent to this operation, right? An arbitrary vector A. Now this arbitrary vector is a combination of some I, some J, some K, right?
yes.
So that is why I should be able to write it in this form.
I think I can like summarize my question in some way, that this ket n is one of a vector in some basis set, right, which we've defined previously.
Yes.
Or is it an arbitrary state?
It's a basis set.
So, yes, sir. So now, and on the other side, we've written ket m as like summation over m. So that's also a basis set.
I see.
So
What you
are they
saying.
the
No,
same
no,
basis
right.
set, or are they a different basis set?
Yeah, good question.
Because we are going from
Yeah, if it is the same basis set,
the
then
same
alpha
Hilbert space
nm
to the
has to
same.
be diagonal, right?
Every
No.
other entry.
So the correct statement is n is not a basis set.
Oh, so it's an arbitrary state.
Yeah, it's an arbitrary state. So I said it wrong then. I should say n is not a basis set. Then only this. So it is true only in these two contexts. One is if I say n is a basis set, then m is not the same basis set, which is what you specified, or n is not even a basis
right.
set. Okay.
Ah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you
I
for
get it.
fixing it.
I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I have to fix it in next class because many people are not here. Okay. More comments?
So just to clarify, so the set, either the set of ket n and ket m is different,
Yes.
or ket n is some arbitrary
Some
state.
arbitrary state. One of these two is, so since I kept saying n is a basis state, so for example, it is like this example. Okay. Actually, this statement is correct. So since n is a basis state, so then all I'm saying is that this a is some arbitrary vector, and that a can be expressed in terms of some other basis sets. Okay. So it is like saying, so let me say it pictorially. So this is I, and so this is I, this is J, this is K. Now I can have another 3 basis sets. Okay.
Yes.
This is K prime, J prime, and I prime. Okay. Now I am saying that these vector, some are, so I am taking one of these vector. So let's say I am taking J. Okay, and applying alpha on J, and that becomes some other arbitrary vector. Okay, A. Now this A can be written in terms of this I prime
Yes.
plus J prime plus K prime.
Yes.
So one must be careful about that, otherwise it looks trivial. Good, thanks for being careful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I have to fix that statement. Yeah, it is either an arbitrary vector or a different basis set. Cannot be the same. I mean, it can be the same, but then it is trivial. Then there is no n and m. It's a diagonal always. So the statement is correct, but it is not complete. So thanks for completing it. Okay, more comments?
Sir,
Okay.
all this is given in Sakurai, right? Mainly.
It's in Sakurai. See, what I'm doing in the class is not, I'm not following a book.
Right.
I'm just illustrating the points from the lecture.
But to do it like properly, system like rigorously.
Yeah, Sakurai, everything is there in Sakurai. That's right.
The
And
first
if you want to, I strongly recommend you to follow one book, because even if I have consulted many books while preparing, if you follow multiple books, you'll be confused, because each book has a different set of notation. And then you have to start from scratch first to understand the notation, then to understand what they are saying. So I will suggest you to follow one book, and that is Sakurai. Okay. And everything I'm talking about is there in Sakurai. I'm just illustrating that. And the lecture is more close to the actual book, but lecture is made, when I made the lecture, I read many books and then I composed it, and it's a hybrid of all that. And I specify all the books which I consulted, okay, for each lecture in the reference section. Yeah. Everything is clear? Are you getting the idea? And
So, like, can you explain the alpha and
sorry, say that again.
Alpha and by doing the transformation?
This discussion, this point.
Not this one, the one after that, where you wrote M alpha and
Here, this point.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can
let
you
me write
explain
it
it
again,
again?
because it is badly, it's now tampered badly. So the statement is following. So if my alpha, so the statement is this: if I have an operator alpha that is acting on a basis vector, so it could be a basis vector or an arbitrary vector. So that is what was the correction. I should be able to write it as alpha mn m. Okay. Why? Because this alpha operation of a operator. So again, whenever confused, think in terms of these classical vectors. So n is either a basis vector or an arbitrary vector. So when I do a linear operation, I convert this vector into another vector. Now I should be able to write this vector in terms of the other, in terms of the basis vector, either the same set or a different set, or a different set like this. Okay. Either way, both are fine. But if it's the same set, it is trivial, because this n will go to another vector, and that should be expressible exactly without any diagonal component. Okay. So for generality, let's assume n is some arbitrary vector. So if I do this operation on an arbitrary vector, I get some linear combination, and this is this alpha nm. Now I want to know what is this alpha nm. So for that, I multiply it by, so this alpha nm is basically some m alpha n. Okay. So that is basically this matrix element. Okay.
So like, how do we know that alpha m is this one? I didn't
Sorry,
get that.
say that again.
Like, how are we able to see that alpha m is m into alpha into k10? I didn't get that part. I might have
Yeah,
missed.
because I am multiplying this by the basis set, orthogonal basis set of this vector. Okay. So when I do that, then what I get on this side? I get this side is basically so I will write it as alpha nm.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, got it.
Wait, I mixed something again. Yeah, correct.
Okay,
So
you
I multiply
multiplied
it by
both
m.
sides.
Yeah, so I multiplied both sides by m.
M
So
is the vector.
m is orthogonal. So I multiply it by its the same m. So m is orthogonal. So alpha nm is just m alpha n. So operationally, what I have to do, I have to sandwich this operator, and I mean basically I have to find the action of this operator on this vector that will give me another vector, and then I have to multiply it by the corresponding column form of this m vector. So if I keep doing it, then I know all these alpha nm, and what these alpha nms are, they are basically, they forms a matrix. Okay, like that. So the main point through this, that if I want to know what is the action of an operator on any vector, all I have to know is this alpha nm, and I am giving a prescription of finding this alpha nm. Okay. Now how it works actually, I'll give some actual example, but I suggest you to play with these three vectors. Okay, these ijk vectors, then
So,
you will immediately know this.
one thing, I think it's okay only. I think I made an error in kind of judging.
No, what? Then you convinced me about that error. Okay, what is
No,
the error?
because like if I take if I just consider 2D, so I take I cap, which is 1 0 column vector, and I operate the square matrix 1 2 3 4 on 1 0. I get 1 3, which is 1 into 1 0 plus 3 into 0 1. So that's I cap plus 3 j cap, which is like a non-trivial
Wait,
combination.
so this is a 1 0, and you have 1 2 3 4, and you get
1 3.
1 and 3.
Which is a non-trivial
1
combination.
3 0 1. Yeah, right. So then this statement is always true. Yeah. So then this statement is always true, basically. Good.
Sorry.
Okay. Oh no, it's okay. Since you were able to convince me, so then it is fine. It's my fault also. So the point is, this statement is then always true. So for any vector, so it's good. So this kind of argument gives us a better picture. So it is true for any vector, as long as you are able to express it in terms of some basis vector. Okay, but the advantage of choosing it to be a basis vector is that then this operation becomes very simple. Then all I have to do is multiply it by some m. So let me generalize it even more. So I choose this n to be a basis vector. Okay. So then what is the advantage of doing that? The advantage is, so then I am writing this as some linear combination of m. Okay. So now I multiply this both side by, so let me So I'm using the same notation again and again. So let me use some p. Let me use some p. So now I multiply it by m alpha n. So this is p. So now I multiply by m sum over p alpha n p p. Okay. So now this m pass through because this alpha is a scalar. So I have this p alpha n p m and p. Now this is delta mp. So therefore you have alpha nm. So this is, I think, the most clean proof of this statement, because I am using the same notation. That's what makes the thing muddly. Make sense, everybody? Whoever is still here.
Can you summarize the entire point that you discussed, right?
Yeah, so
Right.
it is true for any vector, but here I am writing this n to be a basis vector. So
Basically the point is you can convert any vector to another vector using alpha,
Yes.
using the alpha.
alpha. But the calculation, this particular form, to do this particular form, I am writing this n to be a basis vector.
Okay,
Because
so
otherwise
what
I
is the
cannot use.
confusion
Because
concept?
otherwise I couldn't have used this. Okay, that is why I'm using the basis vector. So the confusion was following. So the confusion was that if I apply this alpha on this n, if this n is a basis vector, then what Einish was saying, that it will give me it should give me another basis vector, and which is a, what was the confusion? What did you say? Then after it got clear, it looks so obvious. Einish, can you repeat the confusion?
No, I thought the matrix would be diagonal.
Yeah, so now I remember. So what he thought is that this matrix will be n again. So what
if
he thought,
the basis sets are same.
if n is a basis vector, this guy must be proportional to n again. That is what he thought, and I somehow believed also that. But this is not true, because this example clearly tells me if this n is 1, 0 and this is my some arbitrary matrix, what you get is a linear combination of the basis vectors in this space. Okay. So this statement is not true, and that is why you can write this and you can use this identity. Is it clear, Ivan?
Yeah, kind of. Let me think.
No, what is the confusion? It should not be kind of, it should be very clear.
No, it takes time to think.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Regarding the linear algebra part,
Yeah. Okay, fine. So Google says no need to read Shankar. Yeah, it's so if you read Sakura, you get everything. So Shankar, you can read, but it is not essential. So Sakura is enough. Yeah.
So essentially alpha nm just gives the coefficient with respect to that basis.
Yeah, so you know all these numbers, because you need to know this number to know this, that what this n becomes after the alpha, and that is essential because any state psi is a linear combination of
all the basis vectors.
So if you understand how the operator acts on n, then you know everything. That is why we are
So
doing
like in this case, it's P a basis vector then.
in case P.
In this case, like is P a basis vector or is it a general vector, like any vector?
No, P is a basis vector.
Okay, so n would be a general vector and we are
No,
representing.
n is also a basis vector. See, this statement is always true. But in order to calculate this form, this relation, I am using this n to be a basis vector. Because otherwise I cannot use this nice identity. Right?
So
Because it is true
like,
for if alpha is acting on an arbitrary psi, it will give me some phi vector, right? You agree to that?
yes.
Now that phi should be expressible as again some other, let's say CQQ, some other combination, right?
Where Q is a basis vector. Is that a necessity?
Q is a
Like,
basis vector. Yeah, any vector can be expressed as a basis vector, right?
okay.
So it is always true. So this statement is always true, but this alpha is particularly easy to calculate when this n is a basis vector. Then you can use this identity and then you can write this in this form, and that is, and if that information is everything, which is any vector is expressible in terms of the basis vector. Right? That is why we are doing it in this way. But this statement is always true.
Can you repeat the last part again?
See, this statement is always true. You agree to that, right?
Yeah.
A vector can be go to another vector, and this vector can also, you can write it as some, let's say CRR. Both of them. No, not C. Let me call it D. DRR, and this is some D, and this is some running index, right? So this is always true, anyways. But now we are, instead of using an arbitrary vector, we are using a vector that is a basis vector. That means that has this property. The reason we are using this basis vector is such that we can write down this coefficient nicely in a matrix form. Okay?
So
Okay.
first we are understanding how the operator works for each basis vector so that we can apply it for any general vector. in
Any
that
general vector, correct.
vector space.
That is why we are trying to understand. Because if we understand how the basis transformation under a linear operation, then we know how any vector transformation under that linear operation. That is the philosophy. And based on that philosophy, we are working out these expressions. Is it clear?
Let me think a little more. I will get back if I have any more else.
Okay. But you understand this idea that
Yeah, I got the idea.
understand that how a basis vector transform, you know everything.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So then that idea I'm using it here. That's all. More questions? Okay, if not, let's close the meeting here. I meet again on Thursday. Okay? Then I'll talk about the hermiticity property, which means the missing part of this lecture 4. And
Sure.
then we'll go to the continuous space. Yeah.
Sir, can we say like adding the transformation applied to each basis vector will give the transformation applied to all vector?
Yeah, that is correct. Because this is the statement I originally said. Where it is? Here. Because if you know the operation of the transformation on any vector, you know the operation of the transformation on a vector, which is a combination of those any vectors. So therefore, since any vector is a linear superposition of basis vectors, so if you understand the operation of a transformation, how a transformation acts on a basis vector, then you know how a transformation acts on any vector, because any vector is a superposition of basis vectors. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the live class recordings, I guess you have shared the first 3. Could you share the rest too?
Oh, okay. Perhaps I forgot. Yeah. Keep reminding me about this thing. I will share right now.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay. If that's all, let's end the meeting.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, in case of the mathematical formalism, do we need to read Sankar for that then?
It's not essential, but you can read if you want. The
I mean-
Sakura is enough.
For math also, sir?
Yes. Even
Oh.
for math. Okay. For some Fourier transform, etc., that part is slightly given better in Shankar. But even reading Sakura, you will get all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to follow one book, follow Sakurai. If you want to follow 2 books, then go to Shankar. Okay.
No need of Griffith then.
Griffith you can read, but Griffith is very Griffith you can also read. But I am saying, if you have generally I suggest to read only one book, then read Sakurai. But if you have time and you have patience, then you want to go to 2 books, go to Shankar. If you have more time and patience, go to 3 books, go to Griffith. So that is the hierarchy. So
Okay.
Griffith is actually a very easy book. It's actually a level of in the previous semester course. Now we are going to a little rigorous and non-trivial regime. But Griffith also has its first 2 chapters, right? That is on this mathematical basics. You can also read that. It's very easy.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.